Like that was one of their ace
put
in the
them out of
holes.
work.
Yeah, because they used to know like those little details and how to hack around them, and now it just works.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other features covered over that. Like if you put a directional light in there with a really wide source angle, then it would bounce lighting through light mass, and you wouldn't really notice. But then you had to have an extra directional light in there, which isn't always the look that you want.
Yeah, it made overcast
completely
difficult, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring up a pretty screenshot for our folks.
Okay, so this is a big new feature in 4.3. It's a move toward more dynamic lighting in UE4, and it's called distance field ambient occlusion. Right now it's off, and that's with it on. This is in Fortnite, which is a game that has fully dynamic lighting. Everything here can be destroyed by the player, or the player can just start building stuff, and it needs to all look consistent, and it needs to be grounded too. So anywhere where there's no directional light, before there was only screen space ambient occlusion before.
Yep.
Which screen space ambient occlusion can really only do shadowing increases. It can't do any kind of medium scale ambient occlusion. And of course, as things get off your screen, they can't cast shadows onto your screen anymore. So it wasn't stable as you moved around.
And screen space has some really annoying artifacts.
Yep.
Yeah, like
about
haloing
those
and
a
stuff.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like your third
And the
person, your
ghosting.
first person gun or your third person character would have a halo around him
Yeah.
that's blocking information in the background.
The bigger you make the effect, the more problems it causes, right? Sort of.
Yep, and it gets slower.
Yep.
This method, so this is a much heavier method performance-wise than screen space ambient occlusion, but it allows occlusion to travel much further. So you've got like the ceiling actually shadows the floor, and let me just show you a few screenshots. That's without, that's with. This is before we had the feature. Everything in the shadows is kind of unlit, and with the feature.
Awesome.
It almost goes like no lighting.
Well, we obviously need to boost up our skylight intensity to compensate for it as well.
So because we're now correctly, we're shadowing the skylight more accurately than we were before. Things get darker indoors, but you can compensate for that by just boosting up the skylight brightness, so that it's just a contrast operation instead of like a darkening operation.
Yeah. And all of us artists want to use the dynamic gamma as well to take full advantage of that as well, since now there will actually be something to brighten up to when you go into a dark interior and stuff.
Well,
So.
the eye adaptation can help with
Yeah,
that.
the eye adaptation. Sorry.
Yeah, like this shot, you basically don't see the direct lighting from the sun, so it's all ambient lighting, and all of a sudden everything takes on shape. Like you look through a window and it's dark now, and in game the player can knock down any of those walls and it needs to update dynamically, so we can't bake any of this stuff. So that's what distance field ambient occlusion provides us.
Looks great.
And
Awesome.
different time of day, same shot, because Fortnite supports dynamic time of day. And that's with distance field ambient occlusion, without.
It's huge.
With.
Looks great.
And then inside church. So all those benches are just like floating in the air. Like, can you tell where they are?
Yeah, they're
it's very
floating in
flat.
the air. Yeah.
And now they're on the ground. This is one of those where like I really should have brightened up the skylight to compensate that we're indoors and everything got dark.
I think most people get it.
Yeah, I don't see any windows in there. It's okay.
Cool.
All right, so those are all the screenshots. So now I want to just, the thing with this feature is it doesn't really, it doesn't fully show up in screenshots. You need to see it in action because it's fully dynamic. Go editor.
You got a window here on the other screen.
That was just a load warning. I think it's just taking a second.
Uh-oh.
What did you do, Ryan?
This time it wasn't me.
Yeah, aren't you supposed to blame the programmer?
I bet it's because I moved it to the other monitor in the back. That's why it is.
More technical difficulties. Yeah, let's just restart it real quick.
I cannot see which one it is.
The bottom. There.
Where is it?
One
That?
more.
more
One
up.
more. There
That
you go. Cool.
All right, let's try this
One more
again.
time.
I guess I'll explain a little bit about how it actually works because
Cool.
So because we're pre-computing a distance field around every object, that's where the limitations come in. First of all, you have to build your level in kind of a what do you want?
More modular fashion, right?
Yeah, you have to build your level in a more modular fashion, just like Fortnite has here. Not putting a bunch of self-intersecting meshes. Like the usual way we build stuff is you'd put a wall and then you put pillars inside the wall. but now they're self-intersecting. There's a lot of interior faces in there.
Right.
With this feature, that would cause a lot of over-occlusion, and it just wouldn't have very good quality. Another limitation is that meshes can only be uniformly scaled because the distance field can't be
It's not
squished.
Yeah, yeah.
So it can be mirrored, it can be flipped, but it can't be squished. And like if you try to animate foliage, it causes some problems with this. You basically have to fade out the feature whenever that happens. But maybe we can find some improvements to those problems later. Like I said, this is really early. This is actually the first version of this feature that has made it into artists' hands. Like Monday this week, Fortnite guys first got it.
Yeah.
All right, so I can just start manipulating things, and the ambient occlusion updates automatically.
That's awesome.
Does that show up?
Yep, definitely.
So no lighting build required. It just updates immediately. You can see there's a little bit of delay on the update. That's because it's spreading it out over multiple frames, and that's something that's tweakable.
Nice.
You can basically choose, like, if you want it to be really fast, you make it spread out over more frames. If you want it to be responsive, say you have a car driving through the scene, you spread it out over fewer. You can see, like, as the object occludes more of the sky, the shadowing gets stronger. Let me find that skylight so I can toggle it easily.
So how is it actually storing the data? Is it storing in full 3D like volume around the mesh, or is it actually storing it in texture space?
There's a small volume texture on every single object. It's computed for the resource, so if you place a bunch of components using the same static mesh, it doesn't use any more memory. The reason it's done that way instead of a volume texture around your view or something is that you get way higher effective resolution, which is really important for not leaking through walls. Like normal walls in real life are like 6 inches to a foot, and you cannot tolerate leaking through there. Leaking is probably more noticeable than like too dark of lighting. It always shows up. So having these volume textures aligned to each object, and basically like as I'm rotating this object around, I'm also rotating the volume texture. That allows us to get good enough resolution that we can actually capture these really thin objects.
Interesting.
Oh, what was I going to show? I was going
Seriously,
to just toggle on and off. That was without it. This is basically
Wow.
4.2 lighting and
That's huge.
wrong button.
Perfect.
4.3 lighting.
Wow.
Wow. Beautiful.
That's something else to mess with.
Looks great.
Well, textures haven't streamed in yet for some reason. We're having a recent bug where textures are taking a few minutes, so sorry about that.
Probably are.
That's without it and with it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty cool that we're making more features that work with dynamic scenes, and also that Fortnite will have much better depth perception in all of the unlit, or all of the areas that are only lit by the sky. So we can do better time of day now because there's lots of time of day where the sun's at a grazing angle and most of the scene's in shadow.
Yeah. No, it's great to see, and it's great to finally get some forward progress on some new rendering features here, right?
How are characters handled out of curiosity when they walk through that? Are they also just affected by it the same way as the environment?
Right now they can't cast occlusion. That's going to have to be a different feature because they're skinned, so it can't use the same towpath.
Do they receive
But
it? Though?
we'll make something for that. They don't receive right now. That's just like we didn't get around to it rather than a limitation of the technique.
I got you. Cool.
But it's definitely something we'll want to improve in the future.
Can you speak a bit about what we're doing with the skin shader? I know there was a question in the forums of just general more details of what Martin's working on that, right?
Yeah, it's in progress right now. It's improvements to our screen space subsurface scattering. I don't want to talk too much about it because Martin's the expert and he's still working on it. He's still like it has a limited casting distance. So if this was a huge cave that I was inside of, it would still look like I was outside because it can only cast basically like the distance that you see here. It's about, I mean, you can tweak it per project, but it's about 10 feet.
Is there an option? Yeah, say if I have a very specific set where I want that to work, I could tweak it and just increase the size of my textures, I guess, for my distance fields.
Yeah, you can tweak up the.
So, okay, moving on. Now we're in Fortnite. So we're in the Fortnite editor. This is a test map. And we're going to talk about something really, really cool that John Lindquist put together. So what he's doing, and I'm purposely looking over here and hiding the secret for now. But what he's doing is he's taking a script that he wrote inside of Max. I get excited. Look at the smile on my face. Yeah. And
I'm excited for you. For myself too, but mostly for you.
so he's taking an animation inside of Max. And, think about it this way. When animators are animating a model, it's just one model. It's just all deformers. There's bones and clusters and influences and all that stuff. It's just moving those same vertices over. So what he's doing in his script is he's taking a model and then just measuring the distance frame by frame, where those vertices go. And then he's writing that data to an image. And he's also writing the vertex normal data to a separate image. So what you get is that through world position offset, you're actually getting animated meshes, right?
Because you have all that information.
Exactly.
And how
It
it's
goes-
moving over time. This thing is super rad.
Yeah.
And like as Bill said, it's coming as an extra tool a bonus tool in
It'll-
4.8 for Max.
So you'll get the Max script, and then you'll also get the material function. So,
Sorry, continue. I didn't mean to.
no, that's all right. So what you get is this. So he did this little walk cycle or run cycle, I should say, from the husks, and he baked all this information, right? And then we're doing this through a material. So just to be clear, we're not using bones or something like that. These are just regular mesh particles. You can see that I've just got my mesh data here. This is all animating through the material. And I put this together kind of humorously because it's just generic eye candy, but it is really cool. It opens up a lot of opportunities for like things like background events, like cinematics, like birds, things like that. We can use this stuff for. So and again, the cost is really cheap. Obviously, it's just the draw cost.
This is just so funny to me watching these guys run.
And I did some material stuff here where it's playing at a different speed. Each one is running a little slower, faster. They're starting at a different range or a different frame. Excuse me. There's different sizes for the particles. But if I go ahead inside the map here, you can see, they're lit. The reason they're not, they just have no material. There's no limitation. Like there's no reason we couldn't put that on. But just as an example, this is what he did. Just look at the default material. So to take it a little further, though, to give you some more real-world examples, what we're doing are things like this. So this is an effect I made that plays behind the character when he starts running. So we're getting like very 2D stylized results, and part of that is from the material. But this is like a true volumetric effect. So as I rotate around, you can see the effect actually interacts. It's not always planar. And this is all through the morph targeting system, right? These are just two images that are just moving a mesh. And then I've got a dynamic parameter over here. You can see dynamic, and you can see I've got a morph frame, which is our last parameter. That's this yellow curve here. So we can actually speed up and slow down the animation however we want inside of Cascade. And then even if we have it set to 0 to 1 space, so I could set this value to be 0.5, and it'll only play halfway through the animation instead. There's a couple other things. This is a land effect. So when you go inside the map, and land, when you go inside the map and jump and land, you get this little dust cloud. This is kind of in progress. This is actually what I was working on up until this morning, but this is just like a little foot splash. These are just different elements. So we're getting really cool stylized results, and it just kind of takes our effects to the next level. You really haven't been able to get this kind of level of detail and finesse with just regular old meshes or just regular particles. So the other thing, I kind of see the chat on the left there. The other thing it does do is not only take an animation. So let me actually open up Maya. I've got this guy here. This is the dust kick up that I showed. So I've gone ahead and just animated this inside of Maya. What if you wanted to do something like a fluid sim and you wanted to bake frame by frame? It can also do that. So it can actually take a flip book of meshes, go one by one, and play the next mesh, play the next mesh. Because right now, our vertex order, even though we're animating, the vertex order never changes, right? It's just a matter of rotating and positioning the vertices, right? And then changing their normals and so forth. We do have that option to have flip books, or mesh flip books is what we'll call them, where they have different vertex normal, or vertex counts, and so forth. And it'll just flip between them. So that's the really cool thing. I don't know if you want to see more of it in context in the level we can. I can show you how they're hooked up, but otherwise, I think we should give Olaf a chance to talk and take questions from the community.
Yeah,
and-
yeah, sounds good. We've got quite a few queued up over there. I don't know how many we'll be able to get to today in the time that we've got, but yeah, we can.
I'll go ahead and hit play too while I'm talking, so I can show you some of these effects in action as well. But yeah, we're gonna probably do that. I'll have Linquist hopefully throw together maybe a technical document. So when you, good news too is when the effect that we just showed, so when you land, again, it just really makes it dynamic, right? The particles just feel alive as opposed to before where it's just, stationary meshes and stuff. And then as you run, you can see, I'm gonna try to curl around, but you can see that's the kick up. So we're getting a lot of cool, like really 2D stylized. And then when you stop, you get a little bit of a kick up there and so forth. So I think I can do show HUD to turn that off. Did I show Judd? Oh no. More typos.
Please don't show Judd. That's
We're in the South. Right?
Judd's in timeout.
Cool. So any other
All
questions
of
I can
the
answer? Or are we running out of time?
Yeah.
Can we end with all of the husks?
Yeah, just have them run forever.
And this system has empowered our internal teams to work faster. The Colombo rig set was created by an incredibly talented rigger at Epic, Matt Ringo. The modules he created allowed him to rig one version and reuse for the Lego version. Not only that, all of these modules now are available for them for the future use for the team to help solve new problems. And so here's a look at Colombo's modular rig. This is constructed from a series of connected parts designed around Colombo. And this is our modular control rig editor. Enable the ability to paint weights during Pi, giving you instant feedback directly during runtime. This saves a ton of time without having to round trip. I want to show you how to do that. So you can load up, I have my game instance running on the right with my character here. If you notice her elbow in the right, looks pretty gnarly, right? We see that in a lot of games and stuff a lot of times. So I want to come in here and fix my weights. So now I can load up my instance, and in my skeletal editor, I'm even going to get the camera view and everything. And I can just start smoothing out these weights immediately. So I'm going to clean up her elbow here, make it look a little better. I would spend a lot more time on this realistically, but really coming from this, anything is going to be better. So I'm going to smooth it out, relax. We have a really cool relax tool. It's a really smart, kind of looks at all the surrounding vertices, so it's really effective. So when I hit accept, you're going to see it's going to push it into the game for me. There we go. So now my weights are pushed directly into the game. If I had to do that with Maya, this would have been at least an hour, if not longer, depending on what happens between that data transfer. So with just a few clicks, I was able to update that, and I could check that in and maybe even ship it. So by saying no to round trips, we get new ways to work in Unreal like this. And it's really enabling some awesome workflows. I think we're going to see a lot more stuff coming like this. It's really fun.
For folks that have noticed the little jittery legs or the sliding, this should be an improvement for if you want to increase the speed, which is
Nice.
probably one of the things creators are going to do most. So we think this is going to be a great change for folks building. And I
Thank you
believe we
for
also
sharing.
had at an even higher speed. Is that right, Dan?
Months.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
And in terms
turn
of,
them up.
So in terms of
9,000.
Yep, there they are. Yep. Again, we wanted to reuse the
Woo.
same animation, right?
Ah.
So it's not exactly perfect, but it definitely makes a difference when you're seeing them in game and when you're seeing them as a horde. And they look just a little less janky, which is one of our priorities after we ship tools, is to kind of reduce and remove as much jank as possible and just put those finishing touches.
to drag the mouse around and preview without having to place points or accidentally get confused. You can just drag and drop points on and then preview really easily. So hopefully people will find that a bit more intuitive and fun to use.
Cool. Okay, we're gonna switch back to the video now, and so really just a couple of nice UI improvements and workflow improvements. So let's see.
Welcome back to another episode of Unreal Tips and Tricks. This time we'll look at using distance fields in Unreal. While distance fields have many uses, including soft shadows, real-time ambient occlusion, and other special effects, we'll be focusing on their use to generate real-time, dynamic soft shadows in this episode. Keep in mind, however, it's best to avoid using them for a single advantage such as soft shadows, but rather to make use of all the other options that distance fields provide. In Unreal, we can generate a 3D texture at edit time for rigid static mesh actors. This texture contains a collection of distances to the nearest surface of the mesh, positive values for points on the exterior of the mesh, and negative values for points inside the mesh. This data is used to create very soft, dynamic area shadows at runtime. To make use of distance fields, we first need to enable them in our project. Let's open the project settings window. On the left side, we can scroll down under Engine and select Rendering. From there, we need to go to the Lighting section. Here we'll find Generate Mesh Distance Fields. This will need to be enabled. Once we've enabled it, we're prompted to restart the engine. Before we do that, though, let's look at some of the optimization options here. First up is the 8-bit Mesh Distance Fields option. This will convert distance fields from 16-bit to 8-bit, reducing memory use considerably. But it can introduce artifacts when you have large or thin meshes, so keep that in mind. The next option is to compress distance fields. This again will save memory, but without losing quality. However, if you're doing level streaming at all, this can cause loading hitches as they need to be decompressed at load time of the level. When the project restarts, distance fields will need to be built for all of the meshes in your project, and this can take a considerable amount of time depending on the size of your project, so keep that in mind. Now that the distance fields have all been built, we can visualize them in the viewport. We'll click on the Show button, then go down to Visualize, and then select Mesh Distance Fields. Let's take note of a few things here. First of all, you'll want your meshes to be mostly gray and not mostly white. White means that more ray traces were needed to calculate the distance fields. Secondly, you can see that some objects, such as the bench here, are not very detailed. To use distance fields for this object, we're going to need to increase their resolution. But first, we need to enable any lights that we want to use distance field shadows rather than the usual shadow projection technique. On the Lights Detail panel, first we need to set the light to movable, making it a dynamic light. Now we'll scroll down to the Distance Field Shadows section and we'll enable Ray Traced Distance Field Shadows. We can see that the bench now is projecting a pretty rough low-res shadow. We simply need to adjust the resolution by selecting the bench, then right-clicking and selecting to edit it, opening it in the Static Mesh Editor window. In the viewport on the top left, we can see that we have a distance field texture here, and these three values are the resolution of that texture. It's a cubic texture, and it takes up about 0.05 megabytes of video card memory, or VRAM. So to increase the resolution of our texture, we need to go to LOD 0 on the Details panel. From there, we'll open the Build Settings, and then towards the bottom of the Build Settings, locate Distance Field Resolution Scale. Currently, it's at a value of 1.0. Let's go ahead and raise it up to a value of 5 and hit Apply Changes. Looking in the viewport, we can see the distance field texture is now quite a bit larger, nearly the maximum resolution, and it's taking up 4.28 megabytes of VRAM, or about half of what it's allowed. If you don't want a particular mesh to generate distance fields, we can set the resolution to 0 to completely disable it. Now we can go back to the viewport, and you can see that the shadow here is much higher res, much higher quality, and we get a nice soft area lighting effect. As distance field shadows are fully dynamic, you can see that as I move the chair and the light around, the shadow will update in real time, and you get a very nice effect. Although distance field shadows are dynamic, they will not work on animated or skeletal mesh actors. This includes characters moving through the scene, as well as animated props such as wind-blown trees. In the case of skeletal mesh actors and other animated static mesh actors, the light will not generate a shadow for that actor at all. Distance fields can be used to generate shadows from billboard mesh faces, such as those used in trees and bushes. However, in order for them to look more full, we need to go back into the static mesh editor window for these types of actors. Then we need to enable two-sided distance field generation, which can be found below the resolution scale. All right, so using distance fields, you're going to be able to achieve a great number of real-time dynamic effects in your project, such as we looked at today with dynamic soft shadows. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next Unreal Tips and Tricks.
Like grenades off the waist of the character, and so they were assigned an invisible material. Now that we tried to get on lower spec the character, this is because we didn't want that character to look too neutral once we removed those facial bones. For mobile, we use LOD1 as our min LOD. So that means we essentially just cook out LOD settings. And this is an image just kind of giving you an idea of how that works. In Fortnite, we decided that LOD1 will remove facial parts of the character, like pouches or straps, when they didn't want to have them displayed on the character. And if so, let's turn on the directional light and swap out the skylight for something that works better for that platform. For effects, we started using explicit detail modes. In the past, our detail modes were inclusive. That means that anything in low detail mode, medium quality loss. We also consolidated our effects materials and utilized switches. Previously, there had been a few materials that look too big, don't need to be, and we also consolidated similar textures. So an example would be we had a few, they basically switched to low quality mode, tweaked their culling distances, culling objects aggressively that are smaller than a player. We also, for environment model optimization, our models have about 3 to 4 LODs, depending upon. We also had to combine meshes together. Here you can see the ground, which is not destructive. The biggest optimizations we were able to make for console 60 and for mobile was to do an optimization path. It doesn't play nicely with traditional LOD methods where you simply reduce the polygons being used. So we had to have our artists make custom LODs for these models where they're watertight models. The storm clouds in Fortnite are built using tessellated planes in the sky that are tiling. This allows us to cull those planes. Thanks. I'm going to hand it off to Ryan to
level will have for its LEDs. In the way, going back to before. So the area to look to if you want to actually spot differences. But as we get closer, it switches to the actual actors. And you can see a very subtle dithered fade there, but it holds up pretty well, we think. So this lowered HLOD triangle count pretty soon. It's kind of a blobby mess. And then with the impostors, it looks much more defined, and you can tell what the trees are meant to look like. This saved around 180,000 triangles from the always loaded memory and around 270,000 verts, which is what we actually tend to talk about when we discuss optimization, since verts is what your things like vertex shaders actually operate on and what defines the memory cost more than triangles. And the GIF there is just showing what the transition is like as you go into the forest. The biggest thing to notice is you'll start to see the wind animation when it switches to a real tree, but that should be the most noticeable giveaway. The other thing we had to do is simplify the landscape pretty heavily. When we got the new version of Map 2.0 that had things like tilted towers and the new biomes, it doubled its layer count up to 8 or so. As of UE 4.19, UE 4 limited the mobile terrain layers to be 3. So we reached a compromise where the engineers expanded the mobile renderer to have no limit to the layers, but we still knew we had to simplify the material pretty heavily. On the right, I'm showing the different masks that were there previously. So all the black and white ones are hand-painted masks that a level designer went in and painted on the terrain. The 3 biomes up top, forest, gravel, mud, roads. And then this nice colorful thing at the bottom there is a cavity map that one of our level designers, Stu Fitzsimmons, made in Substance Designer. And that gives the whole terrain a little bit of more macro, detailed, kind of an artistic touch. And you see another layer was required called no topology in order to blend out that cavity map where it met up with static meshes like cliffs, because you would see a seam. So to simplify that, what we basically did is took every layer that we could and combined it into one texture, which we refer to as the combined color map. That was done using a combination of a blueprint tool and a few switches inside of the material where we'd say, okay, turn this landscape, instead of rendering its high-quality PC mode, to just piping through all the color information from all the different layers, and then we capture that with the scene capture actor and render it to a texture, and then reference that in the mobile path instead. We also did a few other optimizations, such as disabling fancy height blends and extra cliff textures on low-end mobile. So that's the result. We now have 4 painted layers and 1 combined color map for the terrain. And this also applies to low-quality PC, as well as mobile. So it's another example of where we try to do things that would benefit all the platforms where it applies, rather than just doing mobile-specific optimizations. So this is a comparison of what the landscape looks like on high-end PC and console right now, 2 different views. And this is what it looks like on the low PC version and mobile permutation. So the main difference that you can see from the sky is just that I'm going to go back one more time. The gravel layer seems to get a little bit more powerful, and it grays out the terrain a little bit, and that's the result of using a standard linear blend as opposed to a height blend, just because the level designers were painting with very soft masks because they were only seeing little peaks of rocks poking through, whereas now we see the whole linear contribution. And it's something we could tweak in the future. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is some fake shadow techniques that I added to the map. This is kind of an update to an old school method where we would use blob shadows underneath objects. You know, everyone knows that from Mario. You have a nice little soft blob shadow underneath you, and that's what grounds the character. And without some sort of grounding shadow, trees kind of look like they're floating, so it helps the quality. This version was made by taking captures of each tree from 4 different angles and then converting each of those to a distance field. And since we have 4 angles, we can pack each of them into the RGBA channels of a texture. And then essentially all of those trees get atlased into one little sub-UV texture, and the different times of day are kind of encoded in those color values there. So the way that that's actually applied is that the Vertex shader, or I should also say that each tree has a single little quad, which is 2 triangles underneath it. And then the Vertex shader distorts that quad based on the time of day, stretching it out to be longer during dusk and dawn. And then to make the actual shadow shape match the tree, a time of day weight is calculated from the current light vector. And basically what that does is it takes a 0 to 1 input and remaps it to be a rainbow gradient. So basically on that frame on the right, if you were to give it any 0 to 1 input, you would get back that color on that rainbow gradient. And then that is able to extract the right part of the atlas, or not the atlas, the channel packing with a dot product. And the reason that works is because you can't really blend together traditional opacity masks. Once the threshold passes one to the other, you'll just see it pop. Whereas with the distance fields, because they have a continuous gradient, they will appear to morph very smoothly for almost free in this case, because we still just have one texture lookup. So that concludes this part of our tech art talk. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to show the video. The mesh, that one. This one, yeah.
There we go.
You can see a little bit of it here. So this is Adventure Peely. And some of the stuff we do here is we hide the character's head when you're in first-person view. We hide your backpack. And you can see here we're distorting the position of the shoulders. We're pulling them back behind where the camera is. But they're tracking 100% with the camera now. So when you look down, they get ripped off the character. And when you look up, the character's body kind of tracks along with the camera. And that's to prevent a whole bunch of the vertices, part of the mesh, from kind of pushing into the camera.
We did have a lot of real-time react, Dan, please.
Yeah, so in this video, this kind of shows off in a little bit slower motion some of the stuff that we do when you're transitioning from third person to first person. So if you look at the positioning of the head there, when we get the camera really close to the character, the head slides off to the left side of the screen. Since we released, we've changed a little bit how this works, but you get the idea. There you go. We actually transition the whole body now. Yeah. So this kind of shows a little bit why we would want to keep the camera a little bit to the right.
We wanted to be able to continue with that. We wanted to let creators be able to choose the scene FOV, but the weapons and to blend from scene FOV to first-person FOV as you go up. You can see that in certain cases, we've got some vertices that appear to be shearing off of this the skin's dress.
Same kind of scene FOV, the main camera FOV, and this is experimenting with different FOVs that we're rendering the drum gun in Fortnite or in Ballistic Hat. So you can see that the different FOVs really drastically change the feel of the weapon. Another big aspect of the performance of the weapon overall is how it recoils. For the most part, the biggest part of what you're seeing in recoil is done procedurally. The animators do author kind of some of the basic parts, but it's more or less kind of making sure the trigger is being pulled and the weapon going back and like the slide on the weapon moving. But how the weapon moves in the character's hand is being controlled procedurally. And we do that within the chooser table here. So you can see I am kind of tweaking a value to make it so the weapon kicks down a whole lot. So you can really see the big difference between more or less what we do normally and how changing one value really changes what it looks like. And I'll say it might be worth pointing out that you see a graph here, that purple line that's kind of bouncing around. That's one of the tools I added to make my...
Really? In terms of what was happening?
Yeah, it's the same behavior. It shows how different proportion characters can look wildly different.
It's weirdly less disturbing than the Peely one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what maybe because he's a banana and not an animal, but I don't know. Oh yeah, this is cool. You see that, everyone? Oh my. Ship it. That's right. Love it.
It's
not the birds too. Yes, the birds. Everyone. If it works, it works. That's right.
And luckily, as long as you don't see any of this stuff on the camera,
Yeah, this is
we
just
actually
for you
saw.
all.
I won't mention the other game, but when we were looking into this stuff, we saw other games that did this same sort of thing when they were crouching behind like barricades.
Hundreds of sub-objects. This is our culling effect in the game. And this is a bounce effect that we apply to every interaction that the player makes with the world. Having tried out fractured meshes and decals and a few other approaches, we just felt like none of them we divide it by the radius and invert it. And it produces a result like this. And then we multiply it by an impact vector. And what that does is it basically, we wanted the player to be able to explore the world, and we wanted to populate the world with as many assets as we possibly could. So we needed a culling operation. And I felt like this was another net lesson, and we applied it to the approach that we eventually came up with, which is basically a scale operation from the pivot point of the feed a value into the shader called the distance cull fade, which is another UE4 feature that pulls apart. So the first transformation is motion or warping as a post-process to that animation grayscale value. So what we do to do that is we create a distance calculation from the world position of the vertices. We'll go into what happens to the boards when they're pulled off the wall. Well, the answer is simple. They get masked by the pixel shader, and yeah, that's the talk. Thanks.